Welcome to Borders Talk, dots, dashes, and the stories they tell. We are Zalfa Fagali
and Gillian Roberts, two border studies academics in England's East Midlands from different countries with multiple passports.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is our very last episode of Season 2. Season 2, as you'll remember, of course, is our season of keywords, and we are picking up on one line of conversation from last month's episode. This episode, we're going to be thinking about borders and airports. We have with us an amazing special guest who Gillian was going to introduce.
Our very special guest today is Nasser Hussain, who is a senior lecturer in literature and creative writing at Leeds Beckett University. His first poetry collection, entitled Bold Face, was published in 2014. He published Sky Writings in 2018, Love Language in 2023, and The Point is coming out in a few months' time. He also writes critical material. Nasser's research interests include contemporary poetry and poetics, embodiment and performance, autobiography, conceptual writing, and the ethics of appropriation. He has even been known, with some pressure from yours truly, to write about borders. Fun fact, Nasser is very talented in the field of cake baking, which I've been privileged to witness, but not so much in the field of cricket. Welcome, Nasser.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us.
Oh, man, what a pleasure.
It's great to have you for a roundup of Season 2. So I'll just get started with some questions. Your own life has involved lots of border crossings. How do you think these border crossings have impacted on your relationship to language, to place, to poetics? I wrote this question and then realized it's massive, so apologies.
And what's going to say, William? That's an 8-in-1 question. So, Nasser, do whatever you need to do to break that apart.
Yeah, it's a big question. It's a big question. It's a good question. My first instinct when I saw that was to wonder if I have crossed multiple borders or if I've crossed like one border a lot.
Yeah.
Right?
That is included in multiple border crossings.
Right. So I do frequently cross a border. I don't know that I cross many borders, which is a shade of difference there. But then at the same time,
this is what happens when you ask a poet a question.
Well, man, we've just gotten started.
I was going to say, though, that no border is ever the same. Even the same border is different every time you cross it.
You know what? That is exactly what my partner told me this morning. Is it the same border twice? But I also can sort of think of myself as kind of the physical embodiment of border crossings. I'm the result of my biological family who left Pakistan at different points in their lives, emigrated to England, and then from England to Canada. And I'm kind of one of the outputs of that set of migrations.
You're their submission to rough, basically.
Yeah, and maybe an impact case study unto myself. But gosh, are we talking to an in-group of academics here? That's awesome.
We will clarify for those outside of the UKHE orbit. The show notes.
Yeah, that's a real in-joke there, speaking of borders. But yeah, I think, as I was saying, like sort of the result of those border crossings, and you end up with me, who is displaced in certain ways and placed in other ways. I'm like monolingual in English with a pretty specific Canadian, if not North American accent, which places me in lots of ways and displaces me in lots of other ways. Because now, since leaving Canada and coming to the UK for the last 23, almost 24 years now, and being unable to shake my relationship to language and speech does kind of mark me out in the context of West Yorkshire, where I live, which is great. It's fine. And I'm lucky enough to be able to move around in the space without too much trouble. but it definitely has an impact on my sense of how placed I am. Yeah, that's one of the three: language, place, and poetics. I can speak to that there's a kind of place that I am in, but then am not in at the same time.
I'm going to get a bit academic supervisory on you and say, what specifically do you mean?
Yeah, well, I'm sure, Jillian, you may be familiar with this, but, every time you meet someone new in certain parts of the UK, you get the question. I'd love to test it. What is the question?
The question I've had is, what part of the States are you from?
Yes, which is a variation on like, where are you from, right?
Yeah. Zalfa, what is your version, by the way?
It depends on what accent comes out of my mouth that day.
Okay.
And because it can skew one way or the other, depending on who I've been spending time with.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, if I sound a little bit mid-Atlantic, which I sometimes can, people ask me where in Canada.
Right.
And I go, oh, I'm not from Canada. And they go, oh, well, because if you're from Canada, they don't like being asked about the US. So that's why we asked that. And I said, well, I'm not from there either. And then everybody gets very discombobulated and I just leave them there with mystery.
That's nice. It would be brilliant. And we can't evidence this in terms of data, but if you, in fact, had what part of Canada you're from more than I had or Nasser had, actually, that would be brilliant.
I think it's unlikely because I just make sure that people don't ask me questions. I try not to speak to anyone at all. That's why we have a podcast, Julian.
That's the question.
So the unexamined life is definitely worth living. Yeah, definitely. I know no one asks the question to make somebody feel uncomfortable, but it's a consistent reminder that I'm not supposed to be here. The secondary question is often like, what are you doing here? Which is, again, in terms of language, and we're still talking about language in a way, that question's anodyne in lots of ways. Well, yeah, what are you doing? Right? What's your job? What's your occupation? But it very closely seems to hook into an idea of like, why are you here?
What is the purpose of your visit?
Yeah, also that, what are you doing here? You don't belong here. There can be a kind of aggressive undertone at points to that line of questioning.
Do you get a bit of an incredulous response sometimes? Like when you say you're from Canada, do they go, oh my God, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
No way.
That's another kind of intonation on that where it's like, why would you even bother coming here? Right? And so why are you here?
I'm just curious whether you ever reply, oh, like, I was born here.
Oh, yeah. That depends. Sometimes I'm like, well, if I was born in the UK, but I lived in Canada all my life, or, why are you here? And I'll say, because of the climate, which is, it's much funnier when I do that in January than, say, June 2026.
Because of the lack of air conditioning. That's why I decided to come back to the UK.
Right. And people often have questions about how English I am, or how Canadian I am, or how Pakistani I am. And I think that my particular set of circumstances puts me in no particular place anymore. My relationship to place is a bit more porous than it used to be. I think before I moved to the UK, I was pretty sure I was Canadian. I've lived in the UK for about as long as I did in Canada. So, yeah, there are subtle shifts that happen depending on the day and what my relationship to place often is, which is fun. Like, I wouldn't trade it.
Yeah, a lot of that resonates. With me as well.
And then to poetics, as I was thinking about this question, it led me, it led me to like Derrida, I think kind of ultimately.
Naturally.
Or some poor understanding of Derrida or post-structuralism, but, can I use a boundary and a border in a kind of largely interchangeable way, right? They're related concepts, they overlap a lot, but there's this little difference between the two. And then I think about the kinds of poetry that I'm interested in. I'll give credit to Christian Book for the phrase limit cases. So for your listenership, books like Eunoia or the Xenotext by Christian Book are examples of a limit case in poetry where you push it to a point where it seems the restrictions are almost impossible, and what's a boundary and what's a border and what's a limit. And I think in my work, The Point is a new example where I'm trying to push towards a kind of boundary or a limit, what's possible, using only exclamation points.
So awesome.
And so too in skywritings, which was kind of the first limit case. And I didn't even get close to the limit, but there are thousands and thousands more sky poems that could be written. But writing with IATA airport codes, either as discrete words or syllables, is a kind of limit. And probably for this podcast, a really interesting one, given the geographical conceit that's embedded in the airport codes themselves. So thinking about borders and the ways in which limits and boundaries and borders help us both define a thing, but also open up these slippages and the nuances of difference is beneficial in lots of ways. The border as a part of an ordering function that distinguishes us. I really like a border sometimes, like the Canadian border between Canada and her southern neighbor is a really useful border, in certain political climates, right?
And certain political times.
Yeah, perhaps the one we're living in right now. And that's really beneficial because it helps me orient myself, and I might suggest most Canadians, in relation to something that is different.
Yeah.
That may overlap a lot, but isn't quite the same. So what part of Canada or what part of America are you from speaks to that kind of difference and sameness.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's really great to have a border, and sometimes it's, not so great to have a border. So they delineate, I guess that's kind of a rambling answer, but that sense of differences and overlap is really kind of deeply embedded in the way that I think about the language and thus the poetry.
So I'm curious, and we'll talk more about skywritings and the codes, but how much did you think about airports before you thought about airport codes and poetry?
Oh, man. This is deep Canadiana stuff here, but the airport that I would visit most often is Lester B. Pearson in Toronto. And the other end of that flight in the UK would be Manchester.
Yeah.
And the three letter code for Manchester, which is on your baggage tags and all over the airport and the departure boards, et cetera, MAN stands for Manchester. And there's a kind of, cozy and appropriate sense of abbreviation to man for Manchester. Great. Yeah. Everything makes sense. And then, of course, you fly to Toronto, where the airport code is, and I can pause here, is Alpha. I know Jillian knows the answer, but it's Alpha.
YYZ?
Yeah, it is. It's YYZ, which
Except
makes...
we call it YYZ, but yes.
Yes, very good. YYZ.
Sorry, wrong border side.
But YYZ makes absolutely no sense to me.
Do you know what Victoria's is?
I know that Vancouver's YVR.
Yeah.
So that comes close. You can almost see Vancouver in VR, but the Y still kind of throws me.
Victoria is YYJ.
YYJ. Nonsense, right? That alone, I think, rankled for a long time, even before I left Canada. I was like, these just don't seem to cohere, right? Yeah. Ottawa, and for this project, Canada is largely blank from it, except YOW, Yow, is Ottawa.
For Ottawa. Yeah.
So there's a couple of Canadian airports in here.
I've seen Canadians who aren't writing poems based on airport codes. They'll put things on social media and they'll refer to places where they are or going to by airport codes.
Yeah.
Is that just an us thing? Does everyone do that?
I do that.
Do you? Okay, great.
Calendar is there full of airport and train station codes, but we can talk about train station another time, and they are a little bit more sensible.
Yeah, but like, here I am in YEG and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, it probably encodes a lot, right? It would imply that you flee there
Yeah.
or that you orient yourself via these linguistic coordinates. So that would already give somebody on social media a clue as to how and why you got there. And that certainly would shape your experience in a doubly coded way,
Yeah.
which I think is great. It's a bit of a flex, I suppose, but that's a matter of taste if you're into that kind of thing. And then there was that moment in 16 when I sat at Manchester Airport and saw all the baggage tags and their departure codes. And the question emerged in my head when I thought, well, I wonder how many of these things actually make little words. Because, of course, MAN is not Manchester, it's man.
Yeah.
And that moment where I could like detach the code from its instrumental function kind of lit up the departure board in a brand new way for me. So I saw LAX instead of LAX.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, there's two.
Got two words.
Yeah, and I can go lax man, and that's almost a sentence. It probably technically is, right? And then the sport began, and just answering that question alone took quite a bit of time of combing through all of the airports in the IATA database and trying to sort them in some way or another.
Was that the beginning? Did you just go through them all and kind of categorize them?
Yep, that was it.
Did you have a spreadsheet?
Yeah, there is a spreadsheet.
Nice.
Is a spreadsheet. Yeah, it was a feasibility study for a while where I would just see how many words I could find. And then I started trying to write phrases and sentences. And once I'd gotten to, I think I found around, I don't know, I'd say like somewhere between 1,100 and 1,500 words and or syllables. So not even all of them are used in my book. But I do have a map that you can download from Coach House Books, which will show you the world with all of the airports that would qualify for the project embedded or mapped onto their geographical spaces. And I have one here on A0 paper, and my students will draw new sky poems and connect all these airports year on year. So it's starting to get pretty messy.
That's incredible.
But it's a fun little toy. Yeah, it's a great toy to play with. It's been a while since I've thought about skywritings, but I'm very proud of it because it's fun and goofy in a lot of ways, but it also has this kind of, I think, kind of serious claim about language and the earth. Because if you are a non-English pilot, you still have to recognize the Latin alphabet long enough to be able to know where you're going. Like it's like the English alphabet sets the coordinates in a kind of deeply structural way.
Well, and presumably air traffic control folk are communicating in English using these.
Yeah. And even above airports, there are waypoints.
Yeah.
This is part of the research. So waypoints are 5-letter codes that exist in the sky. Like they're in geosynchronous orbit, as it were.
It's like the sky's version of what 3 words?
Yes.
What 5 letters?
Yeah. And these 5-letter codes, the only one I know off by heart is the flight path into New Zealand.
Right.
It is apparently Waltz,
Oh.
Ingma, INGMA, and then tilde.
But into New Zealand, that's the wrong country.
I know. It was so funny that waltzing Matilda is a path in the sky. And that I think the word poems, if I'm remembering correctly, and I'd love a listener to correct me, is a waypoint somewhere over Buffalo in New York, which is kind of a lovely thing for those of you who know, like the poetics program at Buffalo, New York.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic.
Yeah, so like the English language and just the sheer effort to organize our comings and goings on a global scale is conducted through our alphabet.
Hashtag everyday empire.
Yeah, it really is, right? But what else can we do? Like the pragmatics of it now are such that it would be really hard to undo that.
Yeah.
There might be a way of recalibrating our relationship to that everyday empire. I don't know. Like, I'm way out of my pocket here. But I wonder if it's all possible to sort of take the good with the bad, as it were.
Do you think that when you were writing skywritings, part of either the intention or maybe the effect was to sort of like defamiliarize English via the airport codes, making it kind of strange and uncanny?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another one of those like kind of real serious poetry projects that's kind of embedded in that kind of goofy book. But detaching the language, the letters, and the syllables from their instrumental function as airport codes is a lesson in defamiliarizing and detaching language from all kinds of, if you can do it with airports, you can do it with everything, right? And we can de-institutionalize the language a little bit and de-instrumentalize it, which I think nowadays passes for familiar, like defamiliarizing language and de-institutionalizing language might almost become the same thing, if I'm being really pessimistic, but the state of language in our times, right? But what's a poet if they're not out there making it reappear, refreshing the language? This is Victor Slawski. This is imagist stuff. I often hesitate to mention Ezra Pound, but it's not a bad call. Like, we got to make it new.
Yeah.
There's no more deadening force to language than the institutional. So low stakes, yeah. Now you can look at an airport departure board and have some fun, right? If I've done my job, you'll be picking up the little words.
It's a good point because we have an 8-hour wait this summer in YVR. So maybe the resident 12-year-olds and I can spend some time.
It could be a little game,
It could be because it's a lot of time to fill. Well, I wanted to ask if you would mind reading one of the poems in Skywritings, just so our listeners unfamiliar with the book can get a tangible sense of what you were doing.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, there's a bunch in here, like The Cat, the Hat, which is quite a long poem. Part of the fun of this book is I can just describe them and people might get it. So The Cat, the Hat is an erasure poem in which I took the cat in the hat by Dr. Seuss and deleted every word that wasn't an airport code.
Fab.
So you end up with lines like, the sun did not, was too wet, sat the all wet day, sat, and how had, too wet out, and too sat, the did all. All was sit, and did not one bit. And it, deforms the book. But yeah, it exhausts that text. The 3-letter airport codes, which I thought was a pretty fun joke.
It still feels very Dr. Seuss at the same time.
And it maintains it, doesn't it? Right? Yeah. You can almost see the original text through the erasure. I think one of my favorite ones is the ARK, THEARK, which I spell, again, to remind everyone their airport codes. And it's one of the ones where I'm almost using only 3-letter words, except for a few proper names. And the proper names are the names of the people on the ark.
Right.
And that's Noah, his sons, and their wives.
Yeah.
So I name all of those people, and you'll see the workaround when it comes, because that was the other thing that this project involved, was a lot of workarounds, because I want to say something, but the airport codes don't really let you do it. The other final note is TWO is not an airport code. So I defaulted, again, another workaround, I used dos, the Spanish.
Love it.
And I'll interrupt myself one more time just to say that I know that tuna and fish and eels, goldfish and eels can swim and may not have had a place on the ark, but...
You don't know they'd survive a flood.
It's true. I made the map, so I'm keeping them in. The ark. Get dos ahi, dos koi, dos eel, dos cow and cub, bee and boa, yak and leo, doe and dog, dos ape, ant, asp, auk, dos bat, rat, cat, cur, and mog, ewe and gnu, gad, fly, and mayfly, ram, nag, and pet pig, fat hog, pug, and pup, the lamb, kid, and the fox, kit, the elk, rock, and yak, the sea sow, and taurus, orf, babe, bobs, cougar, caw, mew, ewe, zip, yip, wag, paw, and get, one Noah and his ems Ara, one Ham and Nel Ata Muk, one Shem and his Bay, one Japheth and Ada Tan Esi, all the DNA and RNA. Get the hay for the poo pit, get the aft wet, dry the bow oar, row the pen. Yea, see the Tor, Ararat. And Ararat,
Love it.
yeah, Ararat's
Fantastic.
the mountain that the ark lands on. A Tor is a word for a hill. I couldn't get Shem's wife, which is Sequela Tabab. I was unable to form that in airport codes, so the workaround
I think
was
fair.
Yeah.
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 So I went for Bay,
Yeah.
and that's kind of emblematic of a lot of the struggle in the book was
And
to.
it means I'm in the poem, so I'm fine with that. With Bay here, Gillian, in case you weren't sure.
Nice. So it was a question of like, sometimes I'd get so close and find this one piece that I couldn't fit in, and I'd like have to work a solution for it.
What I really love is how much work your reader has to do as well in piecing stuff together. And it's a bit like learning to read all over again, which is really humbling. But then the added pleasure of recognition, which is really fabulous. Maybe because it's been a few years since I've been teaching a child to read in the middle of a pandemic, but there's such a satisfaction in the got it moment as an adult, which is really lovely.
Yeah, I think we spend a lot of time thinking we know it all. And I guess that's what the airport gave me most of all, was a space and a place to just notice things, because there's so little to do in any kind of real sense, beyond like, I don't know, rampant consumerism. After that, there's just nothing to do. So you have to like read a book or people watch or enter some kind of waiting lounge of the soul. Right. And
Threshold.
yeah. And there is this kind of wonderful, almost Zen quality to time spent in these waiting areas. If you can get past the true boredom, you can kind of get to observe things. And there's a clarity there, which I have certainly carried with me after skywriting. So like now my job is to try and notice things. And you can enter that space via the airport lounge, and you don't even have to be in an airport lounge for that to work.
So to what extent are all airports basically the same for you now? Or maybe they always were?
I did a lot of research. I was looking into airports a lot when I was reading this. Chris Shaberg has a number of books about airportness, he calls it, which is airportness starts before you get to the airport. It's a state of being that, you pack your bags, you pat all your pockets, like you're already kind of in the airport space at that point, long before you even get to the physical space.
You might even be weighing your luggage.
Right. Standing on a scale and hugging your backpack and getting off and doing some math. Yeah, of course. And it's 4 a.m. and all of that is a special kind of state of being for Chris Shaberg. And I think we all kind of intuitively can relate. But yeah, I was looking into like architecture and layouts and the deep capitalist drive that's embedded in the architecture to keep you moving around, keep you shopping, to extract things from you. So in that sense, yeah, airports are very similar in that, especially the big ones at like, let's say, I don't know, Dubai. There are these kind of gateway spaces in the world. Heathrow will be one of them, watching Manchester Airport refurbish itself, quite painfully over the last few years. And it will very much, I think, achieve a lot of those goals that airports have to try and do, which is to make money.
Sort of like the high streetification of airports.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very interesting because it is a lot of the same products. But I mean, Istanbul Airport is probably one of my favorites for sure, for sheer quirkiness. And
Which one, sorry?
the major airport in Istanbul.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can feel a deeply Turkish vibe. Just as I'm thinking about airports again, that was a really special one. I think that one's great. It's hard to put my finger on exactly why, but it's probably because it's not as high-streeted. Or it is high-streeted, but in its own way.
Yeah.
It retains a kind of cultural stamp, which I absolutely appreciate.
Zalfa, do you have a favorite airport?
No, I have a least favorite airport, but I won't. I made I won't. Well, will I? I don't think Birmingham Airport's very hospitable.
Yeah, they put it all on the train station, man.
I don't know. I have a certain fondness because I can get the train very straightforwardly.
I have no objection to being able to access the airport. It's just that you get there and it's barely some seats.
Yeah.
It's not that I want to sit around buying anything, but I find it, Nasser, you were talking about how borders are kind of disorienting or places that you can then reorient yourself. Birmingham is neither a place of orientation or disorientation. I just find it to be a place of constant delay and I can't get anything to eat. And all I want to do is go back home. But I also find it very difficult to drive. So I do tend to drive there, to return in the car. So I'll get in the car and then try and get back to Leicester. And no matter how many times I do it, I just can't exit the airport. So it's this sort of eternal return of Birmingham.
That does sound bad. That sounds really bad.
No, I should say I love Birmingham City. It's just the airport.
I mean, my two other favorites are Teresina, Brazil, which is THE.
Have you actually been there or do you just like the code?
No. I have to shout out Teresina, Brazil. I've never been, of course. But without Teresina, Brazil and Griffin Sandusky Airport, which I think is in Ohio.
Yeah.
And that's AND.
Well, thank goodness for that.
Yeah, like those were clutch moments in putting this book together. Because without and the,
you'd be screwed.
Really, it would have made it unbelievably difficult. And I don't even know if those airports are around anymore post-COVID. A lot of them shut down.
Wow.
And I was using a lot of like very obscure places, but it really reoriented the globe for me. So like, Tokyo, Toronto, London, like those LHR is of no value to me, right?
Yeah.
But
that's right.
But DOS.
Sick burn though, like LHR, you're of no value.
But Teresina, Brazil, or Nassau in the Bahamas, I'll let you guess what that was. But it's NAS.
For real, nice.
So it's fun to find these kinds of little toys running around inside of a database of codes.
So, because we've been speaking about airports, both visited and unvisited, we like to ask our guests whether they have a story of a border they have known. So, Nasser, is there a border anecdote that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, sure. I lived in a border town, and it was the beginning of my apprenticeship as a writer. So Windsor, Ontario, and the University of Windsor, which is basically in the shadow of the Ambassador Bridge, which is a giant span of metal and concrete that connects America to Canada. It's either 50,000 or 5,000 trucks a day. I may be off by a power of 10.
We'll put it in the show notes.
But, Windsor and Detroit are very closely linked, but also quite distant from one another. You can see the flags, you can see the stars and bars on the buildings across the river.
Yeah.
And the day I started my master's degree, the workshop leader told us to go home, get up in the morning, and write about whatever's in the news.
Okay.
And I was a good student, so I woke up in the morning, and it was September 11th, 2001.
expletive is what I
Yeah.
was about to say.
And I was listening to the CBC radio, and it was Haydn and some tinkling sort of classical music. And then this voice came on and said, and a plane has just hit the World Trade Center, and now back to the Brahms. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. And we like just moved into this house.
So are you listening to the CBC?
CBC radio.
Yeah.
Yeah. And 3, I think, was the classical station, or 1. I can't remember. We had just moved in. We hadn't even unpacked the television. I like got it out, put it on a table and plugged it in and turned it on just in time to watch the second plane hit. And it's a border town. And like, I'm only 48 hours old in the city at this point.
Jeez.
And I had no way of understanding what was about to happen, but they shut the border down
Yeah.
like immediately. And now you've got thousands of 18-wheeled trucks, and this artery between these two countries is severed in this moment. And on both sides, there are people whose only job was to get to the other side.
Yeah.
And that was not going to happen. It was a wild time to be in Windsor, Ontario, for sure.
I forgot.
And I lived my life next to that border, and I never crossed it. I never once went to America from there because I didn't have a Canadian passport at that point.
Right.
I didn't want to risk any weirdness. There were too many stories. I think borders and stories are really interesting because it was just like, don't go over there, man. You know, if you look like you do and sound like you sound, that's probably not a place for guys with Muslim names. And I was like, I'm just going to take the hint.
And we have a recurrence of those stories in the present moment.
Yeah. And I think so much of modern life, particularly in terms of travel, has been dictated by that point. Again, we take it all for granted. The idea that you have to take out your toiletries and put them in little plastic baggies, which we're now moving away from again, right?
Yeah.
And I can see people being anxious about, wait, you don't need to see my gels and liquids in a little plastic bag. It's okay. I can just x-ray.
Can leave my shoes on.
Yeah. Right. My belt and my shoes on. Are we starting to trust each other again? Or has the surveillance gotten better?
I think it's the latter.
Right. But it gives off the feeling that we're kind of more, I don't know. But so much of crossing a border, whatever the TSA has become, you know, in the American context, I guess it's funny to be old enough to have moments of your own life appear as historically momentous in their own right. So yeah, that was a border I never crossed. Always wanted to. Will do someday, but it was fun living in a border town.
That's a really potent example, especially to end the season with a border that you lived on basically and adjacent to without crossing.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Well, you're very welcome.
Can you remember how many days, out of just random interest, that the border was shut?
Oh, it was a while. I want to say it was
Yeah,
weeks.
and I just looked it up. It's like 5,000 trucks a day. So I'm just thinking of the queue.
It was insane.
Tens of thousands of trucks just
Backed up.
Yeah.
You know,
Incredible.
straight through the middle of town. Like there's no like byway that they come to. The Ambassador Bridge, that road runs right through the center of the city.
That really, it throws into sharp relief, I guess, the urgency of that artery. Yeah.
Yeah.
I recently saw in Nottingham an amateur production of Come From Away, the musical that's about the planes that landed in Gander, Newfoundland. And I'm just wondering, where is the musical for the truckers at the Ambassador Bridge? And Nasser, I think you should write it. And the libretto should be an airport codes.
Ooh, I don't know. I mean, I want to say challenge accepted, but that might be a bridge too far. Oh, goodness.
Oh, I see what you did there. Very nice. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. And
Oh, my goodness.
it's been great to chat with you.
You're absolutely welcome, Zalfa, Jillian. What a pleasure.
The pleasure was all ours.
Absolutely. Thank you.
What borders have you known? Tell us your stories.
Until next time, we've been Zalfa and Jillian on the line. Thanks for listening.